Welcome to Christian Overcomers, and thank you for joining us for this Bible study. Genesis 38, Judah's lust used for and against Satan's seed. In chapter 37, we read the tragic story of Joseph getting sold into slavery by his brothers, and in this chapter, we're going to see the drama continue. His brother Judah is going to marry, now check this out, a Canaanite woman and father children through her, something that was strictly prohibited by his forefathers. And I have no doubt that Satan was behind the scenes managing this whole setup, using the sexual vices of Judah in an attempt to pollute the seed line of the Messiah, to mix the holy seed with unholy seed, thus carrying on the same old struggle between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent that wages on to this day. And you can find that battle recorded in Genesis, or foretold of in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. And though Judah will fall for Satan's scheme, we're going to see Satan get outmaneuvered by a righteous woman named Tamar, who now listen to this, who also plays on Judah's sexual vices. But this time not to damage, but rather to preserve the integrity of the seed line of the Messiah. But how can this be? How can playing on someone's weakness actually be used for a good thing? Would God allow such a thing? Well, we're going to figure that out when we get into the word here. So let's get into it. Genesis chapter 38, verse 1, and it reads, "And it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned to a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira." Okay, we're going to find out this Hira guy. Who is this guy? Well, we're going to find out he's the kind of guy that, you could think of him as Judah's worldly pal. This is the guy that would always hook him up with everything. Hey, I got something for you. We can do something really fun. I know some people. You name it. But you know what? If Proverbs were around at the time of Judah, it would have been good for him to read Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20, where it says, "He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed." And we're going to see Judah not follow this advice. And it's going to cost him greatly. Verse 2. "And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite." Now think about that. A daughter of a certain Canaanite. What in the world is he doing with a Canaanite? Okay, why is he there? And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went into her. Okay, he went into her. Well, we all know what that means. All right. All right, let's talk about this a little bit. Shua. Shua means, this word Shua here, it means rich or noble. Okay? This was the father of Judah's Canaanite wife. She was probably from a wealthy Canaanite clan, well-to-do, and so on. But you notice it says that Judah saw there, okay? Judah saw there. Let me go back here. We'll concentrate on that. And Judah saw there. Okay, so he was looking upon this woman with his eyes. In other words, Judah was driven to this Canaanite woman by what he saw, the lust of his eyes. No doubt she was probably dressed very seductively, just like all of the other Canaanite women, because that was normal for them, sort of how like it's becoming normal today. There's very little modesty in current dressing trends these days. And so what we see here, this was a relationship built off of lust, what he saw with his eyes, and it isn't going to end good for him. We should let that be a warning to us. Relationships built, especially you young men out there, relationships built off of lust almost always end in tragedy. Okay? And, marrying a Canaanite woman in the first place, a Canaanite woman, she was a pagan, she was a worldly woman. This was forbidden for the Israelites. Judah should have known this. His great-grandfather Abraham went through great lengths to make sure Grandpa Isaac did not marry a Canaanite. And when Abraham commissioned his servant to find a wife for Isaac, he strictly said, "Thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites." And you can find that in Genesis 24, verse 3. And when Isaac blessed Jacob, he warned him also, saying, in Genesis 28, verse 6, "Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan." And in Deuteronomy chapter 7, God himself prohibited the Israelites from marrying Canaanites. And he said, and this is the reason he gave, he says, "For they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods." In Deuteronomy 7, verse 4. And it's so true. Marry a worldly woman or a man, and you'll be in an almost impossible struggle to stay true to God. You're going to be constantly battling, constantly fighting temptation. And, especially young men out there, don't kid yourself. If you're finding yourself attracted to a worldly woman and you're trying to justify it in your mind, don't kid yourself, because if you're flirting with that idea, it's definitely not worth it. And Judah, as we're going to see here in this chapter, is a good example of why this is not good. It's not good to be drawn away purely by the lust of your eyes. Now, that isn't to say that you can't appreciate or want to marry a beautiful woman, but she's got to be a beautiful, godly woman, a woman with dignity and honor and integrity as well. Not some woman that's just flaunting her body, showing her skin, trying to seduce men. All right? And then there was Esau, who didn't heed Abraham's warning either. He married 2 Canaanite wives and an Ishmaelite, causing great grief to his family. This was a generation. So Judah should have known this. Judah should have learned Judah should have looked at his family history and said, "I don't want to be an Esau," because Esau was known as the profane, worldly man of the family. Okay, but let's talk about this just a little bit more before we get on to the next verses here. Why can't they marry Canaanite women? Somebody might be thinking. Well, first off, the Canaanites were pagans. They worshiped false gods. They were people of the world, so to speak. But that's not the only reason. The Canaanites were a cursed people going all the way back to Ham. In Genesis chapter 9, verses 22 through 27, you'll find out that that Canaan was cursed because of the sin that Ham had committed. So for Judah to marry into this cursed Canaanite line and to intermix it with the blessed line of Abraham completely disregards the word of God, shows his lack of self-control, and displays very shallow spiritual awareness on his part. I can't help but think of 1 John chapter 2, verses 16 through 17, where it says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world." Okay? "And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof." It's only temporal. But check this out. "But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever." Think about that. I'm sure Judah justified this in his mind by saying something like, these Canaanite women are the only women around for miles. Besides, maybe I can be a good influence upon her. I mean, she's hot. I don't want to let this opportunity pass. Besides, if I marry her, there's a chance I can convert her away from paganism. We all kind of sometimes do that thinking, don't we? That's sort of like saying, I'm going to go to a strip club or a whorehouse because I like to see beautiful women naked. But I'm really there to do the Lord's work. Who knows? I might be able to convert one of the women there. Now, you know what? It's wonderful if you can convert a prostitute to the Lord. The Lord loves converted sinners. But you don't have to go inside a whorehouse to taste of guilty pleasures in order to preach the gospel to a harlot. There are plenty of other opportunities and places where we can do that. You could stand outside and catch them coming to work, before they take off all their clothes. And it's just some men will do this. Sometimes we'll try to cover over our lust with so-called good intentions. But Proverbs chapter 6, verse 27 says, "Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes be not burned?" In other words, if you're saying, "Well, I'll just sin a little bit and but I'll bring some good out of it." Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? The Proverbs say. Proverbs 6, verse 27. All right. So, bottom line, the lesson is, and the lesson that we're going to see here is do not marry a worldly woman. Do not marry someone purely by their outward appearance, thinking you can shape them later. While you gratify your flesh now. If the relationship is founded by the lust of the flesh, it is likely going to end tragically for the same reasons it began. For the same reasons it began. All right, let's move on. This is what happened. So he takes this Canaanite wife, and she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name And she conceived again, and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. And she yet again conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Kezeb when she bare him. Notice the woman here is naming all of her sons. Now, this thought just came into my mind at this time while going over this. I didn't really look into this, but I don't remember any scriptures offhand. Now, I could be wrong. Somebody could say, "Hey, Pastor Ben, there is a case." But I can't think of any biblical examples where the woman named the sons. To my understanding, I believe it's always been the father who had that right or that authority to give his sons their names. But I could be wrong, but I just wanted to point that out. It's interesting. It says that she named them all when they came out. Why do I bring that up? Well, I bring that up because, the more and more we get away from biblical values, biblical principles, the more and more we get away from the biblical patriarchy and lean towards feminism and radical women's liberation and all that type of stuff. The more we get into that, the more we become paganized, like the Canaanites of old. And the more our society suffers. Okay, I guess that's another topic for another time. But I guess I'll just recap real quick. So she has 3 sons. Judah has 3 mixed sons, half Israelite and half Canaanite. First one was his name means watcher. Second son, his name was Onan, and she named him strong. Shelah, and I don't understand why she named him this, but it means, or Shelah. This boy's name means a petition. Okay, 3 Canaanite sons, 3 half Israelite, half Canaanite sons. And what's interesting is this place that they were at. It says he was at Kezeb, okay? Kezeb. He was at Kezeb. That name of that place actually means false. So we are looking at a false seed here, or false children that were not meant to be in the birth line of the Messiah. Again, Satan is cheering right now. He's, Judah's mixing his seed up with the Canaanites, which was strictly prohibited in the Bible by God's prophets, his biblical patriarchy that he set up on the earth. And Satan's got to be just, this is a huge victory. Probably a greater victory than we could even imagine that Satan believes he has here. Okay? Because I'm saying that, I'll say again, there has been an ongoing struggle since Genesis 3 verse 15. A struggle between the woman's seed and the serpent's seed. That's between God's children and Satan's children. Okay? Now we'll build off of this in a little bit here. Okay, verse 6. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar, or Tamar, however you want to say that there. Now, Tamar means palm tree. It doesn't say where Tamar was from, but since we are going to find out later, that she is in the birth line of the Messiah, it is highly unlikely that she was a Canaanite. All right. In fact, I think it's nearly impossible to say that she was a Canaanite, as I believe this whole story was about, you'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit, is going to be avoiding the Canaanites. Okay. So no doubt she was probably of another family line related to Abraham, like Sarah and Rebecca were. And again, I bring this up now because it'll be important to understand later on in this chapter. So, Judah took a wife. He arranged a marriage for his firstborn with a woman named Tamar. Verse 7. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. Now look at that. The Lord slew this guy. He killed Judah's firstborn because he was wicked. Well, there's no surprise here that this boy was wicked, because after all, is the product of a cursed line intermixing with the holy line chosen by God. It doesn't say how God killed him. It could have been a plague, some kind of an accident, you name it. It's just, from a biblical perspective, Moses, the writer of this book, knew that God took his life. All throughout the Bible, you'll find that the Lord kills or judges some people because of their wickedness. There are examples, yes, even in the New Testament as well. Some New Testament examples can be found in Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 11, Acts chapter 12, verse 23, and Revelation chapter 2, verse 22, where God actually will kill some people as a judgment, here and now. Okay? So now God doesn't just go around and kill wicked people. We know that. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any wicked people left on earth and heaven would be here already, right? But at times, God does kill people who pose a danger to his covenant people, or because he wants to send some kind of a message. Okay? But here's an Old Testament example of where he does that. And I have no doubt he killed him because he didn't want him to father children through Tamar, because he had another plan for the seed that would produce children in Tamar's womb here. And we'll see that in a little bit here. But verse 8, and Judah said unto Onan, go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. Now, evidently it was customary for the living brother to conceive a child with his dead brother's widowed wife, if she had no children, had no sons. Otherwise, the dead brother would have no means of passing down his inheritance, and it would be lost. But it's interestingly, not only was this customary back here in Genesis, it was later commanded by God in Deuteronomy 25, verse 5. This was a law that the Israelites were to follow. It was to preserve family lines, and to keep inheritances among the tribes and among the families within the tribes. Okay, that was important to God. Verse 9, and Onan knew that the seed should not be his, and it came to pass when he went in unto his brother's wife that he spilled it on the ground, lest he should give seed to his brother. What does it mean he spilled it on the ground? Well, that's exactly what it is. He went in to have sexual relations, and instead of having the seed go inside of the woman, he decided he didn't want to plant his seed. So what Onan did here was equal to rape. He enjoyed the physical interaction with his brother's widowed wife, but refused to provide seed for her. This was the only reason he was supposed to go in unto her in the first place, was to provide children for her and for his dead brother. But what's even worse, by doing what he did, Onan defrauded Tamar so that he would receive his older brother's inheritance. Think about that. Onan was the kind of guy who only cared about himself. Uno number one. And that is why God, we're going to see here in a second. Verse 10, and the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. 2 Canaanite sons of Judah, half Canaanite sons of Judah, are down now because they were both wicked, selfish, worldly. And this example should put the fear of God in us, because at times, I'm going to say it again, at times God severely judges wickedness here and now. This guy probably thought nothing of this. He didn't fear God. He thought, nobody can see me, nobody knows, I'm just not going to provide seed for this woman. But you know what? I do wonder, perhaps God knew Onan would not provide seed for his brother. Because had Onan provided seed, it too would have been Canaanite seed. Unholy seed, unacceptable to God. It would have been an unacceptable line for the Christ to be born through. Interesting. We are actually interesting timing that we're on this chapter, because we're moving into Christmas season here, and I know there's a big debate between whether or not Jesus was conceived or born on December 25th. I believe he was conceived on December 25th and born in sometime around our September, late September. But nevertheless, Um, that's another topic for another time. Verse 11. Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah, my son, be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So Judah's trying to protect his youngest son, his only son left now. I mean, his other two boys got struck dead by God. And this Shelah is the youngest and the only survivor of Judah's Canaanite sons. So he makes a promise here. Hey, when my youngest son Shelah grows up, I will honor the pledge and have him provide seed for you. Okay? Verse 12, and in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted, and went up unto his sheep shearers to Timnath. He and, now here, check this out, his troublemaking pal here. He and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. Okay? It's something, the first time we hear about this Hira guy, Judah marries a Canaanite. Now, what's going to happen? Well, it's interesting. It says Judah was comforted here. I'm unsure, I'm not totally sure of what this means. Was Judah comforted because he was no longer bound to that Canaanite wife? Maybe she was kind of a nag or something, or very stressful for him. I don't know. Or was he going to hit the town in an attempt to comfort himself in the arms of another woman for a night? So I'm not sure which one of the what that means there. It means one of those two things, I believe, that Judah was comforted. Okay, verse 13. And it was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garments off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. Okay? So Shelah was grown. Judah, what does this tell us? Judah had not followed through with his word to Tamar. First, Onan defrauded Tamar of children. And now Judah defrauds her too by not actually giving her to Shelah to produce seed for her. But Tamar is a bright woman, and she's going to come up with a plan here to make this right. And it's interesting. She knew Judah's character a little bit. She's going to dress like a prostitute here in a minute. But for her to know that she heard rumor that he was going up there, I mean, it must have been something he had done in the past. She knew somehow that Judah had some sexual vices that he was unable to control. And Judah saw her and thought her to be an harlot because she had covered her face. So he's got no idea this is his daughter-in-law here. 16, and he turned unto her by the way and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. Come in unto thee means to come in sexually. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will give thee a kid from the flock. And she said, wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give thee? And she said, now check this out, thy signet, and thy bracelets, and thy staff that is in thine hand. And he gave it her, and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. Now, Judah did not know that this was Tamar. All right? So, he gives her his signet, bracelets, and staff until he can go get his payment. Now, these items carry a very important symbolic meaning. Judah, like other wealthy men, used signets or seals to stamp letters, contracts, and other such important documents. The signet proved who they were. It was a symbol of Judah's identity. And the word bracelet would have been better translated cord. This cord was likely attached to the signet to keep it from getting lost or having it get lost or having it getting stolen. And the staff represented Judah's authority. And later on, we're going to find out in Genesis that this staff that Judah that he has represents his right of kingship. His descendants were destined to be Israel's rulers. Genesis 49 verse 10 says, "For the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come." So now think of this. Judah was willing to give up all these spiritual things for a few moments of pleasure. He was willing to give up his identity, his integrity, and his authority. The signet, the cord, and the staff. In other words, all that makes a man a true man, he was willing to throw away just to gratify the pleasures of his flesh. You know, how stupid can we be at times? Trading away everlasting things for temporary pleasures. And you might say, well, I never went into a harlot. But hey, this can be done in other ways. Think about it. Proverbs 7 verses 25 through 27 warn us against this very thing concerning the harlot. It says, "Let not thine heart decline to her ways. Go not astray in her paths, for she hath cast down many wounded. Yea, many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death." Judah was willing to give all this up. Think about that. Think about that. You know, now she conceived by him. Now this all sounds strange. But this was her plan. This is what she wanted. She was being defrauded of children, and she thought, I got this is something I can do to get this to come to pass. Perhaps God even put it in her heart. I don't know. But think of this. If Tamar was not a Canaanite, like I full-heartedly believe, this child would then be of uncontaminated seed. Not mixed with a cursed seed line like Canaan, rendering Judah's poor choice. You know, this renders what happened here. Renders Judah's poor choice of having a Canaanite wife and children null and void. Because now, as we're going to find out, the chosen line will go through Tamar and not Judah's Canaanite wife or sons because of the trickery of this woman. So stepping back, we can see that Satan used Judah's sexual lust to get him to marry a Canaanite. But God in turn allowed another woman, Tamar, to use Judah's sexual lust in an attempt to acquire children and preserve the integrity of the seed line of the woman. God always is outsmarting Satan. And he can take a bad thing and turn it around to make his plan come to pass. All right. And she arose and went away and laid by her veil from her and put on the garments of her widowhood. She's getting her regular clothes back on. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend the Adullamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. Uh-oh. What's he going to do now? He wanted to pay, but now he's not getting his pledge back. And it's interesting here. Friend the Adullamite, Judah not only hangs out with this guy, and gets in a bunch of trouble with him, hits the town with him, but he's also using this worldly pal now here to do his dirty work. He's trying to keep, a distance from his own sin. Verse 21, then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said, there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. Now, you gotta really pay attention to this. He says here, lest we be shamed. All right? That's what Judah was trying to avoid. He basically says, hey, just forget about it then. Let her have my staff, the cord, and the signet, because if we keep trying to find her, everyone will know what we did. So he wants to hide his sin. But now think about this. But little does he realize his sins would be brought to light anyways, and that we would still be reading about them thousands of years after his death. Now keep that in mind. Because as much as we may desperately try at times, we can't hide our sins. Everything we do in secret will eventually be known. There is no such thing as a secret sin. Jesus says in Mark 4 verse 22, for there is nothing hid which shall not be manifested, neither was anything kept secret, but that it should come abroad. It's a sobering thought. That's a sobering thought. Verse 24, and it came to pass about 3 months after that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot. And also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth, and let her be burnt. Think about that. What a hypocrite. Can you believe this? He just slept with her, thinking she was a prostitute 3 months ago, and now he wants her burnt. Of course, he doesn't realize it was her. But you know what? Don't worry. God has a plan to expose his hypocrisy. And he also has a plan to restore to him the things that he was willing to throw away. And, let's see. Verse 25, when she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child? And she said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these? The signet, the bracelets, and the staff. Boy, she's got them now. I bet Judah never thought he would get his signet, his cord, and his staff back in a manner like this. These are his personal belongings. This is 100% proof that Judah was the father of her child. And he wants her burnt with fire. Sometimes we judge other people harder than we judge ourselves. Judah is a typical example of that. Sometimes we do things and then somebody else does the same thing we do and we say, they ought to be burnt or something like that. Okay? Oh, that person's a terrible sinner, so rotten. Jesus says, pull the mote out of your own eye before you pull the speck out of your brother's eye. But Judah was caught just red-handed here. Embarrassing. But let's not be so hard on him, because many of us in other ways, in our own ways, are probably guilty of some of the same things. Many of us are guilty at times of being hypocrites. Verse 26, and Judah acknowledged them. Now that is so important. Okay? Judah acknowledged them. That means he repented. Okay? He owned up to it. And Judah acknowledged them and said, she hath been more righteous than I. Because that I gave her not to Shelah my son, and he knew her again no more. More righteous than I. Judah openly acknowledges his sin here. He repents. And he also did the right thing by not continuing to have unlawful sexual relations with Tamar. And we're going to find out that Judah's repentance will cause God's mercy to fall on him and bring restoration to him. Boy, God's mercy is great at times, Today our churches, that's all they seem to teach is mercy, 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 and they don't talk about judgment. And then it's sometimes hard to preach a mercy message because that's all we hear. But here is a great example of mercy. Judah is a fornicator here, sleeping with prostitutes. And not only that, now he's a big hypocrite. Wants his own daughter-in-law burnt to the stake for being a harlot when he was the one who slept with her. God has a way of exposing sin. He's got a way of bringing things in the darkness to the light. And sometimes he does that in our own life if we're paying attention. Sometimes he shows us some things that we're doing that he wants us to stop. We've got to pay attention. Verse 27, and it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. She's going to have 2 boys to replace the 2 dead Canaanite boys of Judah. God is restoring Judah's sons to him. But this time, the right kind of sons, not the Canaanite sons. And it was out of Judah's control. God has an elect. Sometimes, Judah was elected for this purpose. He was chosen. Sometimes when God's chosen servants screw up really bad, God has a way of still bringing his will to pass through them. And thank God for that. I know we can all be appreciative of that. We can't sit here and just point the finger at Judah and saying, that damn Judah, what a damn hypocrite. And we can do that, but we also got to point the finger back at ourselves sometimes. Verse 28, and it came to pass when she travailed that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother's hand came out, and she said, how hast this broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. And it would be through Pharez that the Messiah would be born. You can find that in Luke chapter 3, verse 33, in Mary's genealogy there. And this is the seed line that God is looking for. What an amazing story. Step back and think about this. There is a huge battle taking place here between the woman's seed and the serpent's seed. It looked as if the serpent's seed had prevailed, that the Canaanite sons would be the line through which the Messiah would come. But no. God chose one woman, a righteous woman named Tamar, that came up with a plan and got Judah to have uncontaminated children with her. And afterward came out his brother, and he had a scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Okay, that's it. So let me just, in conclusion here, God could have allowed Judah to throw away everything. But through his grace and mercy, he spared him, restoring unto him the scepter and providing because his children would later become the king line of Israel. He restored to him the scepter, or that staff, and provided another way for him to still be the progenitor of the Messiah. However, I want to give a word of caution. Though he was forgiven, Judah still paid a heavy price for his sin. 2 of his sons were killed by God. Though they were Canaanite sons, they were still Judah's flesh and blood. So it had to have been hard for him. He was shamed in front of everyone, and his reputation was severely damaged. So let us never forget that. Let us never forget the serious consequences that sin brings with it. Sure, there are things that can be forgiven, but there are other things that can't be completely erased or undone. Once they are done, and we have to live with them. And I hope the lessons from this chapter helps us make better decisions before we screw things up. I hope it helps us live in the Spirit rather than for the temporary pleasures of the flesh. And with that said, let's also take a step back and look at the big picture again here. Genesis 3:15 tells us that there would be an ongoing war between the woman's seed and the serpent's seed until finally the head of the serpent is crushed. And in this chapter, we saw a mighty spiritual struggle take place involving these 2 seed lines. Judah's sin of marrying a Canaanite woman was a mighty victory for Satan. However, when it seemed that Satan's seed would be victorious, God outwitted him by the strategery of another woman named Tamar, a righteous woman indeed, deserving of the honor of being the mother of a line of people that the Messiah would come through. So never doubt God, my friends. No matter how gloomy things look, no matter how it looks like the enemy has got us, we're losing. Every attempt by Satan to defeat God will fall flat on its face. God is in control. And we have the victory. Thank you for listening. God bless. Stay in His Word every single day so that you can be a Christian overcomer.